The winter storm howled across Vermont like a desperate prayer, snow piling high against the weathered walls of Oak Ridge Nursing Home. In that frozen dawn, when even the bravest souls stayed behind locked doors, a sound pierced through nature's fury. It wasn't the wind. It was a whimper. Eleanor Thompson heard it first. Near the service entrance, half buried in drifting snow, a soaked cardboard box sagged under the storm's relentless weight. Inside lay a German shepherd puppy, trembling, its honey-brown eyes wide with both terror and defiance. The tiny creature should not have survived the night. Its fur clung in wet patches against fragile ribs, every breath a fragile victory. Yet, when Eleanor's arthritic fingers reached toward it, the puppy didn't simply whine, it answered. A cascade of sounds tumbled forth, guttural, melodic, almost like words. Not just cries for help, but something that resonated deep inside the listener. "He's talking to us," Eleanor whispered, her voice cracking from 3 years of silence. "And I think I understand every word." If you're enjoying this story, leave a like and share where you're watching from. Now let's continue. Oak Ridge Nursing Home stood like a Victorian sentinel against Vermont's unforgiving winters, its red brick exterior weathered by decades of snow and sorrow. Inside, beneath flickering fluorescent lights and faded floral wallpaper, 63 residents lived out their final chapters, many forgotten by the outside world. The facility's finances had grown as thin as the blankets covering the residents' beds. A notice in the staff room spelled doom in corporate language. 30 days until final board evaluation of continued operational viability. Eleanor Thompson had once filled concert halls with her piano students' recitals. Now at 75, arthritis had twisted her graceful fingers into painful hooks, betraying the hands that once danced across ivory keys. Since her husband Frank's death 3 years earlier, she had spoken fewer than 50 words. Every Sunday, between 2 a.m. and 5 p.m., visiting hours, Eleanor sat by the bay window, watching the driveway. No car ever came for her. At night, she kept Frank's broken music box beneath her pillow, its silent gears as frozen as her heart. The grand piano in the common room gathered dust, though she passed it 4 times a day. William Bill Bradley, 68, arrived twice a week, his silver hair and weathered skin making him look every bit the retired veterinarian he was. No one should leave this world alone, he always said. Staff whispered about the faded photograph he carried of his golden retriever, the one he'd had to put down himself when cancer struck. His kindness ran deep, shadowed by grief that lingered in his blue eyes. Then there was Sarah Anderson, the 42-year-old director who managed Oak Ridge with compassion that stretched their meager budget further than logic allowed. Her ponytail and practical shoes hid the fighter within, the woman who constantly battled regulations that valued paperwork over people. Only she knew why she took special interest in Douglas Parker's file. Douglas, the facility's accountant, handled the numbers with cold precision. At 55, his starched shirts and rule-filled binders gave him a sense of control that life elsewhere did not. When dogs barked, his hand unconsciously brushed the jagged scar beneath his chin. Night staff often heard him cry out in his sleep, always the same name, Amanda. A small photo of a smiling girl hid in his wallet, its edges worn from years of guilty touches. And into this fragile ecosystem came Max, the German shepherd, puppy whose voice defied explanation. Not quite barks, not quite words, but something hauntingly in between, something almost human. Bill Bradley arrived at Oak Ridge earlier than usual that morning, fighting through knee-deep snowdrifts. The supply truck had canceled. Vermont blizzards respected neither schedules nor necessity, but Bill's old Ford still had tire chains, and he had 40 years of experience on these roads. He carried bags of essentials, medications, milk, bread, and newspapers that Mrs. Donnelly insisted couldn't wait. Then faint beneath the storm's roar came the sound, a rhythmic whimpering from behind the dumpsters. Bill froze, listening. Decades of hearing distress in animals had trained his ear. Setting down his packages, he waded through the snow toward the sound. "Hello?" he called, his breath clouding in the air. "Someone there?" The whimpering paused, then resumed. Sharper, more desperate, he spotted the cardboard box, half buried, collapsing under slush. Inside, a German shepherd pup no older than 8 weeks lay shaking, its fur matted in frozen clumps. "Poor little fella," Bill murmured, kneeling despite the ache in his knees. "How'd you end up out here?" The puppy lifted its head weakly and made a sound that stopped Bill cold. Not a bark, not a cry, but a melodic chain of tones, rising and falling like a half-remembered lullaby. Eleanor stood in the doorway, a cardigan wrapped tightly around her frail frame. She rarely left her room before breakfast and never during winter storms. "Bring it inside," she said, her voice rusty from disuse. Bill turned, startled. "Eleanor, you shouldn't be out in this cold. Bring it inside," she repeated more firmly. "It's dying." Bill didn't argue. He gathered the trembling pup inside his coat and followed her through the service entrance. Warmth enveloped them, the scent of oatmeal bubbling in industrial pots filling the air. Sarah Anderson looked up from her clipboard. Bill, what on earth? Found him outside. Bill explained, opening his coat. Someone left him to freeze. The puppy made that strange sound again. Soft, questioning, almost conversational. The kitchen staff froze mid-task. Is it talking? Maria, the head cook, asked. Animals don't talk, came a sharp voice from the doorway. Douglas Parker stood there, clutching a stack of budget reports. And they're not permitted in food prep areas, or anywhere in this facility outside therapy hours. For once, Eleanor didn't back down. He'll die if we put him back outside. Her tone was quiet, but it carried weight. The authority of a soul long silent. Douglas frowned. Mrs. Thompson, I understand your concern, but rules exist for a reason. I'll take responsibility. Bill interrupted. He's no health risk once he's cleaned up. I'll keep him in the maintenance room until we find a home. The puppy let out another string of tones, higher pitched, almost melodic. Eleanor smiled faintly. He has something to say about that, she whispered. In that moment, something inside her stirred, a flicker of memory. Her daughter's wedding, the music, Frank's proud hand on her shoulder. Her fingers once danced across piano keys. Now they could barely button a cardigan. The arthritis had stolen her music. And her voice. Sarah studied Eleanor for a long moment, then sighed. The maintenance room's heated. He can stay there for now, 1 week. Then we'll find him a home. Douglas's jaw tightened, but he nodded and left, his hand brushing the scar beneath his chin. Later, as Sarah posted the new notice in the staff room, 29 days until board decision on Oak Ridge's future, Eleanor knelt beside the now bathed puppy. Max looked up at her and made those same strange conversational sounds. I know, she whispered. I've been silent too long myself. Hook line. Sometimes, the softest notes echo loudest in the hearts that have forgotten how to sing. Lowering herself with a grimace, Eleanor faced the piano that had once been her dearest friend. The polished surface reflected a lined, unfamiliar face, a stranger to the young woman who had once played Chopin without sheet music. She placed her twisted hands on the cool keys, but didn't press down. I don't remember how anymore, she whispered. Max tilted his head and vocalized softly. A rising series of notes, almost melodic, as if urging her to try. Eleanor smiled faintly and pressed a single C key. The note hung in the air, pure, fragile, and perfect. With effort, she formed a simple C major chord, wincing as her fingers stretched. Max's reaction stunned the watching residents. He lifted his muzzle and released a sound that matched her chord, rising, falling, harmonizing in a way that seemed almost human. When Eleanor struck another key, Max adjusted his tone to follow. He's singing, breathed Mrs. Whitaker, a retired choir director. My heavens, he's actually singing, in key. Eleanor played another chord, then another, forming the familiar progression of Heart and Soul, the first tune she had ever taught her students. Max followed each change, his strange voice blending with the piano like a duet written by fate itself. For the first time in 3 years, music filled Oak Ridge's common room. And for the first time in 3 years, Eleanor Thompson smiled without reservation. No one noticed Jason, the 19-year-old kitchen assistant, filming quietly from behind the coffee station. The spell broke when Douglas Parker entered, freezing at the doorway. His sharp eyes took in the scene. Eleanor at the piano, Max at her side, and residents gathered close. Miss Anderson, Douglas called sharply. My office, immediately. The confrontation was inevitable. Sarah defended the temporary arrangement while Douglas cited health codes, insurance liabilities, and board policy. This animal has been here a week, Douglas said, tapping the rule book. That's 6 days longer than our agreement. The residents are responding positively, Sarah countered. Eleanor Thompson is playing piano again. Dr. Bradley says Max is healthy and fully vaccinated. Exceptions become precedents. Precedents become liabilities, Douglas warned. The dog leaves within 48 hours. That night, the overnight nurse heard shouting from the administrative wing where Douglas worked late. She found him sweating and disoriented, shouting, "Run, Amanda," before locking himself in the bathroom. By morning, Jason's video of Max singing with Eleanor had escaped Oak Ridge's walls. Staff shared it with family members, who shared it with friends. Within hours, the world had seen it. Someone captioned the clip, "Rescued German Shepherd. Puppet nursing home won't stop talking. Try not to smile at his funny antics." As Max's popularity soared, Eleanor fought a private battle. Pain had returned during her piano sessions, a vice around her chest that stole her breath. The episodes had grown frequent since Frank's death, but she'd told no one. At 75, with arthritis already robbing her independence, she feared a heart condition would finish the job. Our secret, she whispered to Max that evening, slipping him a treat. The puppy whined, placing a paw gently on her knee. sensing what she tried to hide. "I just need to make it to Christmas," she murmured. "I promised Frank I'd hear the carolers one more time." That night, Frank's broken music box lay under her pillow, silent as ever. Beside it rested a small stack of unopened letters, all bearing the same return address: Rebecca Thompson, Seattle, Washington. Each envelope carried the voice of the daughter she couldn't face, not since becoming this fragile reflection of her former self. Outside, the staff bulletin read, 22 days until board decision. 3 days after Jason's video went viral, Oak Ridge found itself the focus of unexpected attention. The clip had surpassed 1 million views. Local news called. Reaction videos poured in. Commenters spoke of hope, healing, and the miracle of Max. "Have you seen this?" Sarah showed Douglas her tablet. "Local news wants to interview us. They're calling him the talking dog of Oak Ridge." Douglas frowned at the headline. "Publicity doesn't change regulations. The animal," Sarah corrected gently, "is named Max, and he's brought more positive attention to Oak Ridge in 3 days than our marketing budget has in 3 years. Before Douglas could respond, the phone rang. Sarah answered, her expression shifting from surprise to delight. "That was Elizabeth Gardner from the Vermont Community Foundation," she announced. "They want to donate $10,000. Because of Max." Douglas blinked. 10,000 won't save Oak Ridge. "It's a start," Sarah said firmly. "And there have been 3 more calls this morning." Oak Ridge's financial reality loomed like a Vermont winter. Bitter, relentless, and closing in. Repairs were overdue, heating unreliable, and the board's ultimatum clear: become financially viable within 30 days or close forever. "I'll take it to the board," Douglas said finally. "But this doesn't solve the regulatory issue." While the administration battled paperwork, Eleanor found new rhythm in her days, each one built around Max and the piano. Every morning she shuffled into the common room, pain dulled by determination. For 20 minutes, her crooked fingers coaxed simple melodies as Max sang beside her. Residents now called it Eleanor's concert, and they rearranged their mornings around the sound of it. But no one saw the aftermath. Eleanor clutching her chest, gasping until the pain eased. No one noticed the untouched heart medicine on her nightstand, or the stack of unopened letters growing higher by the week. Bill noticed. Decades of reading unspoken pain in animals had taught him what to look for in people, too. During his Tuesday volunteer shift, he brought Max for a grooming. "Let's get you cleaned up, buddy," he murmured, brushing through the thick fur. His hand paused, something metallic caught in the bristles. It wasn't a normal ID tag, but a small piece of worn metal engraved with faint markings, CNIREU, and beneath it, a stylized paw print. "You're full of mysteries, aren't you?" Bill muttered, pocketing the tag. Across the hall, Sarah was uncovering mysteries of her own. Quietly, she'd been calling contacts at Vermont State Hospital. "Yes," she whispered into the phone. "Amanda Parker, admitted 25 years ago after a dog attack. Her brother is Douglas Parker." "I see. Thank you." The truth clicked into place. Douglas's obsession with rules wasn't about regulations, it was about guilt. Meanwhile, Douglas kept his own secret log, documenting every interaction with Max, hoping to build a case for removal. Instead, the data betrayed him. Residents' blood pressure improved, moods lifted, and even speech returned to stroke patients. Every bark, every whimper from Max stirred something Douglas feared, memories of teeth and screams and failure. But the residents were no longer silent. They rallied behind Max. Retired attorney Mr. Collins drafted a petition signed by 61 residents. Mrs. Delgado, oxygen tank hissing beside her, formed Max's pack, declaring, "We may be old, but we're not powerless. This is our home, and Max belongs here." Oak Ridge had found its voice again. 15 days before the board's decision, Bill made a discovery that changed everything. The logo matched a long-closed Massachusetts facility, Canine Research and Development. They had pioneered experimental vocal response training in dogs. Max might be one of theirs, Bill told Sarah. "That explains his sounds," she said slowly. "But how did he end up abandoned in a snowstorm?" "I don't know," Bill admitted. "But it makes him even more valuable to Oak Ridge." That afternoon, chaos erupted. Walter Simmons, 87, collapsed mid-T. Max reacted instantly, not barking, but producing a precise pattern of tones, urgent and repeated. He dashed to the nurse's station, continuing his strange call. "Stroke," the head nurse shouted, already dialing emergency services. As paramedics loaded Walter into the ambulance, one murmured, "Good catch. Every minute counts." Eleanor watched with trembling awe. "It wasn't us," she said softly. It was Max. By evening, word of Max's heroism swept through Oak Ridge. Even skeptics watched him with newfound wonder. But the excitement came at a cost. The rush had triggered Eleanor's worst chest pain yet. She collapsed in her bathroom, whispering, "Just need to sit." Max barked, pawing at her leg, then ran to the door, scratching until Nurse Jenny entered and found her slumped against the wall. Gasping, "I need a crash cart. Room 217. Jenny called. Even as chaos unfolded, Max's gaze shifted to the nightstand, to the untouched bottle of pills. "Has she been taking her medication?" the doctor asked. "The bottle's full," Jenny replied grimly. Later, stabilized and pale in her bed, Eleanor pleaded weakly, "Don't send me to the hospital. If I leave, I won't come back. You're not going anywhere," Sarah assured her. "But you have to take your medicine. It makes my fingers too stiff to play," Eleanor whispered. "What's the point of living longer if I can't play?" Bill exchanged a glance with Sarah. "What if we talk to your doctor? Adjust the dose. Fewer side effects. At my age, doctors don't bother with adjustments," Eleanor said sadly. "Not this time," Sarah promised. "We'll make them listen." That night, the board met an emergency session. Donations had reached $45,000. All because of Max. Douglas's arguments about liability began to crumble under financial reality, but when Bill presented his discovery about Max's origins, the tone shifted completely. "I believe Max was trained to detect health issues and communicate through vocal patterns," Bill explained. "He's not just making noise, he's trying to tell us things." Silence followed. Then the board president said, "Mr. Parker, work with Dr. Bradley to verify this. In the meantime, the dog stays." Hook line. Sometimes even the strongest walls begin to crumble when faced with the sound of truth. As the meeting adjourned, Douglas lingered in the dimly lit conference room, the soft hum of the overhead lights the only sound breaking the silence. Conflict was written across his face. 25 years of fear battled against the mounting. Evidence that this dog, this one particular dog, might be different from the one that had destroyed his sister's life and left him with a lifetime of guilt. Outside, in the quiet hallway, Max sat beside Eleanor's wheelchair as she made her slow return to her room. The stack of unopened letters still waited on her nightstand, silent reminders from the daughter who had never stopped trying, despite years of rejection. "Maybe tomorrow," Eleanor whispered to Max. "Maybe tomorrow I'll be brave enough." The next morning, excitement buzzed through Oak Ridge like electricity. The Channel 7 news van pulled into the parking lot, its logo gleaming in the pale sunlight. It was the first media visit Oak Ridge had seen since its 50th anniversary 8 years earlier. "They're here to see Max," Sarah explained to the residents gathered in the common room, many still in bathrobes and slippers. "The video has over 10 million views now. People from all 50 states and 23 countries have watched Eleanor and Max make music together." Eleanor sat by the piano, her oxygen tank standing beside her chair, a reluctant concession after her episode 3 days before. Max rested at her feet, glancing up at her every few moments with what looked like quiet concern. "Are you sure you're up for this?" Bill asked softly. She nodded, her thin fingers brushing the keys. "Frank always said music should be shared," she murmured. "I think he'd approve." The news segment was meant to be brief, a heartwarming story to brighten the morning broadcast. But when the reporter witnessed Max's remarkable vocalizations firsthand, the piece expanded. By noon, 3 more news crews had arrived. By afternoon, a producer from a national morning show was on the phone, eager to schedule a feature. Between interviews, Sarah fielded donation calls nonstop. The nursing home's outdated website, which usually saw 3 visitors a month, crashed after someone hastily added a "Support Oak Ridge" button. "We've hit $100,000, she announced during an emergency staff meeting. Donations range from $5,000 to $20,000 each. Douglas, who had remained unusually quiet amid the frenzy, reviewed the figures with furrowed brow. "It's substantial," he admitted, "but temporary. Feel-good stories fade. We need sustainable funding. This buys us time," Sarah countered. "Time to apply for grants, restructure our budget, maybe even expand services." Outside the conference room, Oak Ridge buzzed with joy. Mrs. Delgado guided the camera crews through the halls like a proud ambassador. Mr. Collins, the retired attorney, spoke eloquently about senior isolation and the power of animal companionship. Even the most reserved residents found themselves sharing stories about Max's quiet magic. Through it all, Max remained calm and focused, responding to each person with his unique vocal tones, seemingly unbothered by the cameras and chaos. Only Eleanor noticed his occasional glances toward the stairwell, ears twitching at sounds others couldn't hear. That afternoon, 92-year-old Gladys Foster misjudged the top step of the main staircase. Her walker slipped, and in a flash, Max bolted from Eleanor's side, bracing his body against Gladys's legs. He let out a piercing rhythmic sound that sent staff running. Within seconds, they caught her before she could fall, a fall that doctors later said would have been catastrophic. Only one camera caught it, but that footage would soon circle the globe. He knew, Bill said afterward. Reviewing the security tape with Sarah, he was watching her before she reached the stairs. He anticipated the fall. That's impossible, Douglas said, though his voice lacked conviction. Not for a dog trained in medical alert and intervention, Bill replied, handing him a folder. I've confirmed Max's origins. The K9 Research and Development Facility trained dogs to detect subtle physiological changes, blood pressure drops, balance issues, even pre-seizure indicators. Their dogs were taught to vocalize patterns to communicate what they sensed. Douglas stared at the documents, his skepticism wavering. Then why was a dog like this abandoned in a snowstorm? Bill hesitated. The facility shut down 3 years ago after losing funding. Some dogs were placed, others weren't. Max would have been a puppy when they closed. The media never saw that conversation. Cameras instead captured the magic unfolding in the common room, where Eleanor had agreed to play a special concert with Max. Every chair was filled. Staff paused their duties. Even kitchen workers gathered in the doorways. Everyone knew, though no one said it aloud, that this might be Eleanor's final performance. Her color was pale, her breath thin. The oxygen cannula framed her face as her trembling fingers began the opening notes of Moonlight Sonata. Once flawless, now simplified, the melody still carried its haunting beauty. Max sat beside her, eyes fixed, responding to her music with low, harmonic tones. He wasn't merely mimicking. He was completing the song, filling the spaces her stiff fingers couldn't reach. Halfway through, Eleanor faltered. Her hands trembled, then stilled. A soft sound escaped her lips, not pain, not fear, just release. Max stood abruptly, emitting a sharp, urgent sound. Bill rushed forward. "Eleanor?" he asked, touching her wrist. She smiled faintly. "Just need to catch my breath," she whispered. Then her eyes rolled back and she slumped sideways. The cameras stopped as medical staff rushed in. Max refused to leave her side, continuing his strange, rhythmic cries even as they lifted her to a wheelchair. Dr. Martin, drawn by the commotion, paused mid-order, his eyes narrowing. "Get me her chart," he said quickly. "And check when she last took her medication." The diagnosis came swiftly: acute heart failure. Eleanor's condition had deteriorated faster than anyone realized, despite her promise to take her medicine. The pill count revealed she had been skipping doses. "She needs hospitalization," Dr. Martin told Sarah quietly. "Will she recover?" she asked. His silence said everything. The joyful media day turned to sorrow. Staff cried quietly. Residents gathered to pray. The board convened an emergency call that evening. 2 issues dominated: Eleanor Thompson's care and the future of Oak Ridge's therapy dog program. Douglas left midway through the meeting. Sarah found him in the chapel, sitting in the half-light. "I visited Amanda yesterday," he said, voice low. "Your sister?" "You already know about her," he murmured. "You worked at Vermont State Hospital before Oak Ridge." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "I was her nurse for 3 years. Douglas's eyes filled with distant pain. "Did she ever talk about the attack?" "Only through art," Sarah said softly. "She painted a little girl, a dog, and a boy trying to help. I was 14, Douglas said, his voice cracking. "She was 7. Everyone said the neighbor's shepherd was gentle. I didn't reach her in time." "You tried," Sarah said. "You carry the scars to prove it." Douglas exhaled shakily. "She never spoke again. That dog destroyed her voice and mine, and that's why you couldn't accept Max," Sarah whispered. He nodded. "But Amanda showed me something yesterday." He pulled out his phone. On the screen was a photo of a woman in her 30s, his sister, smiling softly among a group of therapy dogs. "She doesn't speak," Douglas said, "but she communicates with them. When I showed her Max's video, she wrote me a note, the first one in 25 years. He handed Sarah the slip of paper. It read simply, "Let him stay." Before Sarah could respond, the intercom crackled. "Code Blue, room 217, Eleanor's room." They ran. Staff and residents filled the hallways, whispering prayers. Outside the room, Max howled in his warning tones as nurses worked frantically. For a terrifying moment, the monitor flatlined. Then a heartbeat flickered back to life. "Get her stabilized for transport," Dr. Martin ordered. "Ambulance is 3 minutes out." As they wheeled Eleanor toward the elevator, residents lined the hallway in silent vigil. Max followed the gurney, maintaining perfect distance, his vocalizations steady and haunting. "She's asking for him," a nurse said. "Max," Bill's voice was firm. "He should go with her. He's part of her treatment." Douglas hesitated, then made his choice. "Against regulations," he said quietly. "But I'm going too." As Oak Ridge's representative, as the ambulance doors closed on Eleanor, Max and Douglas, Sarah turned to the board president behind her. "We need to vote now," he said grimly. "Oak Ridge's future can't wait any longer." They refused to move. "We're not moving," Mrs. Whitaker declared, her voice thin but unwavering. "Not until the board guarantees Max can stay. No matter what happens to Eleanor, you need your medications. Your rest," Sarah began softly, her concern rising like steam. "We need dignity," Mr. Collins interrupted, gripping the armrest of his wheelchair. "We need to matter. We need the board to hear us before they vote away the one thing that's made Oak Ridge feel like home again." Bill surveyed the scene before him. 28 residents, average age 82. Forming what might have been the gentlest barricade in protest history. Their hands trembled from Parkinson's, their lungs wheezed with COPD, their joints swelled with arthritis. And yet, in their cloudy eyes burned a fire that decades of institutional living had failed to extinguish. "I'll talk to the board," Sarah promised. "But please, go back to your rooms. Some of you haven't had your evening medications. Neither has Eleanor." Mrs. Whitaker shot back from her wheelchair. "We'll take our pills when she takes hers." While Oak Ridge's residents staged their quiet rebellion, Douglas sat alone in the sterile waiting room of County General Hospital, a manila folder open on his lap. Ever since Bill's revelation about Max's training, Douglas had begun his own investigation, and the truth lay before him in black and white. Training protocols, behavioral assessments, medical alert success rates, page after page detailing the program that had produced Max's extraordinary abilities. "Mr. Parker?" A nurse's voice broke his concentration. "Your sister has arrived." Douglas's pulse quickened. He gathered the papers with trembling hands. He hadn't planned this meeting, hadn't even wanted it if he was honest. But Amanda had insisted through her caseworker. And Douglas couldn't refuse her, not when she'd truly reached out for the first time in decades. The hospital's small chapel had been arranged for privacy. When he entered, Amanda was already waiting in her wheelchair, her caseworker standing nearby. At 32, Amanda Parker's face still carried the faint silvery scars of childhood trauma. Her eyes, so much like his own, shimmered with intelligence her silent mouth could never express. But what Douglas hadn't expected were the dogs, two small therapy animals resting quietly at her feet, wearing bright service vests. "She never goes anywhere without them," the caseworker explained. There, her voice, Amanda's hands began to move. Swift practice gestures Douglas didn't understand. The caseworker translated gently. "She says she wants to see Max." Douglas swallowed hard. "He's with Eleanor, the woman from the video," he said, hesitating. "Amanda, I've spent 25 years protecting you from dogs like the one that hurt you." Amanda's head shook violently. Her hands flew again, urgent, defiant. "She says you've been protecting yourself, not her," the caseworker interpreted. "The dogs saved her. They speak for her when words can't." Amanda reached for her tablet, typing quickly. A message appeared on the screen. Simple, sharp, unshakable. "You kept running from dogs. I found my voice through them." Douglas stared at the words. 25 years of guilt and certainty collapsed beneath 12 sentences of truth. Back at Oak Ridge, the board meeting had dissolved into chaos. Residents and family members had flooded in, alerted by the protest. The local press, still buzzing from the viral piano video, crowded the parking lot. Inside, tempers flared. "The donations have exceeded 200,000, the treasurer announced. "Funds for months. All from a dying woman's viral moment." Another snapped. "What happens when public interest fades? We'll be back here again, just later. There's more," Bill said, stepping in, clutching a thick folder. "I've confirmed everything about Max's training. He's not just any dog. He's part of an experimental medical alert program." He spread the documents across the table. Training logs, research notes, published studies. "He's been trying to communicate specific medical information. He warned us before every emergency. Walter's stroke, Gladys's near fall, Eleanor's heart condition." The board president leaned forward, skeptical yet intrigued. "If this is real, the dog isn't just good publicity. He's a medical asset." Assuming Douglas agrees, before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. The hospital's number. Her voice faltered as she listened. "What is it?" Bill asked. Sarah's eyes glistened. Eleanor's heart stopped. She whispered. "They revived her." But at the hospital, alarms blared. The monitor above Eleanor's bed showed a flat line, its tone slicing through the night. Doctors rushed in, paddles charged as Douglas and Amanda watched from the doorway, Max between them. Then, as if driven by instinct, Max leapt onto the bed, pressing his body against Eleanor's chest. He made the same rhythmic vocalizations Bill had identified, his cardiac alert. The team froze, startled. For a breathless second, time held its breath. Then a beep, a weak rhythm blinked onto the monitor. Then another. "We've got her back," a nurse whispered, eyes wide as Max continued his urgent cries against Eleanor's chest. By morning, County General had new visitors. Dr. Harriet Winters, chief of cardiology, convened an emergency meeting with Douglas, Bill, and Max. "I've practiced medicine for 35 years, she began, scanning Eleanor's chart. "I don't pretend to understand what happened last night, but the data is clear. Her rhythm stabilized exactly when the dog made contact." She looked at Max, who sat proudly beside Bill. "I'm not saying he restarted her heart, but something extraordinary happened." Bill nodded. "The research supports it. His vocalizations are deliberate, a form of communication. He senses physiological changes before machines do." Dr. Winters smiled faintly. "Then the dog stays. Hospital rules be damned. We need every advantage we can get." Before they could respond, a commotion echoed from the hallway. "I'm her daughter," a woman's voice cried. "Please, I need to see her." Douglas stepped out to find a travel-worn woman in her 50s, auburn hair streaked with gray, clothes wrinkled from the road. "Rebecca Thompson?" he asked softly. She turned, eyes red from tears. "Yes. I saw the video yesterday of my mother playing piano with a dog. Then Oak Ridge called about her heart. I took the first flight from Seattle." Douglas led her gently toward Eleanor's room. At the door, Rebecca froze. The sight of her mother, pale and wired to machines, nearly broke her. Max lifted his head, watching her approach, then let out a soft, welcoming sound. "You must be Max," Rebecca whispered, voice trembling. "Thank you for bringing music back to her. She stopped playing after Dad died. I tried everything." As Rebecca reached for her mother's frail hand, Max rested his head beside Eleanor's arm, guarding her heart with his own. No one expected the protest to last through the night, but by dawn, Oak Ridge had become a fortress of quiet defiance. At the center sat Mrs. Delgado, her wheelchair positioned squarely across the administrative hallway, a determined general in a war fought with patience and principle. "Douglas called," Sarah announced to the tense room of board members, nurses, and resident representatives. "Eleanor survived the night. Her condition is guarded, but stable." A ripple of relief passed through the crowd, though tension clung like static in the air. The board president cleared his throat. "We still need to address Oak Ridge's future and the K-9 situation. Before you vote," Sarah said, "there's something you should all know." She passed folders around the long table. "These arrived this morning from Douglas Parker's attorney." Inside was the revelation that shifted everything. For 2 years, Douglas Parker had been secretly funding animal therapy research, donating large sums to 3 institutions, including the facility where his sister Amanda lived. He's been supporting animal therapy programs while fighting against one at Oak Ridge? Mrs. Delgado asked, incredulous. "That makes no sense." "Actually, it does," Sarah replied softly. She took a deep breath. "When I worked at Vermont State Hospital, I was Amanda Parker's nurse for 3 years. Everyone knew her case, the little girl who stopped speaking after a dog attack. Douglas visited her every Sunday. He brought her books, food, anything he thought might reach her, but nothing did." Sarah handed out photographs. Amanda surrounded by therapy dogs, her first written communication in 25 years. Alongside them were the donation receipts. 5 years ago, her facility introduced animal therapy against Douglas's objections. Sarah continued. The results were immediate. Amanda began to heal. A hush filled the room as understanding dawned. Douglas's rigid rules had never been about control or coldness. They were about fear. Fear of losing control again. Fear of facing the thing that had once broken his family. Meanwhile, across town at County General Hospital, another revelation unfolded. Rebecca Thompson sat with Bill Bradley, sorting through her mother's belongings. Among them lay a small, cracked music box. "She carried this everywhere," Rebecca said quietly. "Dad gave it to her on their first anniversary. It played Claire de Lune. It broke the day of his funeral, and she refused to fix it. Said the music stopped when he did." Bill examined the antique with tender care. "The gears are still good," he murmured. "It's just disconnected." He glanced at Max, who watched with bright, curious eyes. "I can fix this if you'd like." While Bill worked with gentle precision, Douglas met his attorney in the hospital cafeteria, signing papers with uncharacteristic urgency. "You're certain about this?" the attorney asked. "It's a significant commitment." Douglas didn't hesitate. "I've never been more certain. I've spent 25 years running from dogs. It's time I stopped." When he returned to Eleanor's room, Rebecca was holding her mother's hand, whispering stories of grandchildren never met and birthdays never celebrated. Max rested by the bedside, his ears twitching each time Rebecca's voice trembled. "The board meeting starts in 30 minutes, Douglas told Bill, who had just finished repairing the music box. "Sarah's presenting our case." "Our case?" Bill asked with a grin. Douglas nodded. "For a permanent animal therapy program at Oak Ridge, with Max as its first official member." Before Bill could reply, Max suddenly stood, alert and focused. His distinctive vocalization filled the room, soft, rhythmic, urgent. On the monitor, Eleanor's heart rhythm flickered, growing stronger, steadier. "What's happening?" Rebecca gasped. He's talking to her, Bill said quietly, and I think she's listening. Douglas lifted his tablet, starting the live video call with Oak Ridge's boardroom. On the screen, Sarah and the board members appeared, faces lit by anticipation. Members of the board, Douglas began, his voice steady. I'm speaking to you from County General to formally request the establishment of the Amanda Parker Foundation for Animal Therapy at Oak Ridge Nursing Home, with an initial endowment of $250,000. From my personal accounts, the room on the other end fell silent, and at that very moment, Eleanor's fingers twitched. Slowly, her hand closed around Rebecca's. Her eyes opened, faint, unfocused, then steady on Max. I heard you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I heard you calling me back. Max responded with soft melodic sounds, the same gentle tones that had captured the world's heart, as if welcoming her home from the edge. 6 months later, Oak Ridge was almost unrecognizable. Fresh paint brightened the hallways. New linens replaced the worn ones. Heating worked in every room for the first time in years. By spring, the old East Wing had transformed into Max's Wing, a vibrant center for animal-assisted therapy and intergenerational programs. Eleanor Thompson sat in the sunroom, May light streaming through the glass. Her oxygen tube had been replaced by a small portable concentrator. Her heart would never fully recover, but she had stabilized thanks, as Dr. Winters had said dryly, to whatever that dog is doing. Mother, you're overexerting again, Rebecca scolded gently, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. I'm fine, Eleanor insisted, smiling as her fingers danced lightly over the portable keyboard on her lap. I need to be ready for next week's grand opening. At her feet, Max lay curled like a sentinel, his intelligent gaze tracking every note and word. When Eleanor flexed her arthritic fingers and winced, he let out 3 soft tones, rising slightly at the end, questioning. Yes, I know, she said, smiling. Time for my break. By now, everyone at Oak Ridge understood Max's language. His once miraculous vocalizations had become ordinary, a second language of empathy and care. Bill Bradley, toolbox in hand, entered with his familiar grin. At 71, he had become Oak Ridge's official animal therapy coordinator. How's our star performer today? He asked. Determined, Rebecca replied, rolling her eyes affectionately. She won't admit she's tired. Not her, Bill laughed. I meant Max. He's our ambassador for the new volunteers. Max stood instantly, tail sweeping the floor in eager approval. Traitor, Eleanor teased, abandoning me for newcomers. Bill helped her move from the keyboard to her favorite chair. He knows you've got Rebecca now. Some of the others still need him more. It was true. For many residents still lonely or unwell, Max and the other therapy dogs, Sunny, the gentle golden retriever, and Einstein, the clever border collie, were lifelines. Mrs. Whitaker's speech therapy had accelerated with Max's help. Mr. Jensen, often lost in dementia's fog, found calm when Einstein lay beside him. How are the renovations coming? Eleanor asked. Ahead of schedule, Bill replied. Douglas keeps the contractors terrified. Even now, the mention of Douglas Parker made newer staff exchange knowing glances. His transformation, from rigid administrator to passionate advocate, was so profound that some joked about secret twins, but those who knew the truth understood. Trauma may harden the heart for a while, but love, in its most unexpected form, has the power to soften it again. Sometimes, the most extraordinary transformations begin quietly, not with grand speeches or miracles, but with the gentle hum of a piano and the steady heartbeat of a loyal dog. Douglas now divided his time between Oak Ridge and the state psychiatric facility where Amanda lived. His sister was transitioning to a group home, making progress her doctors called nothing short of remarkable. Though Amanda still didn't speak, she had found her voice through sign language, written notes, and her therapy dogs, the companions who had given her a language beyond words. Has everyone received their invitations to the dedication ceremony? Eleanor asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. The governor confirmed yesterday, Rebecca replied, and that national morning show wants to do a live broadcast. Eleanor nodded with quiet satisfaction. What began as a viral moment had evolved into a lasting movement. Researchers from universities came to study Max's unique abilities, while medical journals published findings on the health improvements among residents. Oak Ridge had become more than a nursing home. It was a living case study in hope. Mrs. Thompson, a young aide, said from the doorway, "You have visitors." 3 children stepped into the sunlit solarium, led by their elementary school teacher. The youngest, a timid 7-year-old girl, clutched a wrinkled sheet of music. My piano students, Eleanor explained to Bill, her face lighting up. Since her return, Eleanor had resumed teaching. Not the rigorous training of her youth, but soft introductions to music for local children. Her hands, arthritic yet graceful, could no longer perform long pieces, but her ear remained flawless. Twice a week, the solarium filled with laughter, hesitant notes, and the warmth of rediscovered purpose. I practiced every day, the young girl said shyly. I believe you. Emma, Eleanor replied, gesturing toward the grand piano, a gift from a local music store after her video went viral. Show me how much you've improved. As Emma settled on the bench, Max rose and stationed himself beside her. His posture was attentive, protective. Emma began a simple version of Bach's Minuet in G. When she stumbled, Max made an encouraging sound, a soft trill that made the girl giggle before continuing with renewed focus. The transformation of Oak Ridge extended far beyond paint and renovation. A place once dulled by silence now pulsed with life and purpose. Residents who had once accepted routine now spoke up, advocated for themselves, and rediscovered dignity. The Max's Pack Committee, still chaired by Mrs. Delgado, oxygen tank and all, had expanded from dog advocacy to full resident rights. Monthly meetings with the administration ensured every voice was heard. Sarah Anderson, who had turned down multiple offers from larger facilities, remained steadfast at Oak Ridge. I'm not leaving, she had told Douglas. We're building something here, something human. Together, they were crafting a model of care that treated residents not as patients, but as people with stories still unfolding. Sarah's in the conference room, Bill told Eleanor after Emma's lesson ended. Interviewing candidates for the new music therapy position. She wants your input after lunch. Eleanor nodded, smiling. Once, music therapy had been an impossible dream. Now, thanks to the Amanda Parker Foundation and Douglas's relentless advocacy, it was part of their daily rhythm. Rebecca, would you help me back to my room? I should rest before lunch, Eleanor said. She had learned that acknowledging her limits didn't make her weak. It made her wise. As mother and daughter walked slowly down the corridor, they passed a wall once lined with faded landscapes. It was now a photo gallery, the Max Effect, capturing moments of laughter, touch, and transformation between residents and their therapy animals. At its center hung the photo that started it all. Eleanor at the piano, Max beside her, their faces lost in the same melody. I never thought I'd live here, Rebecca murmured. When we looked at houses, I kept worrying I'd be too far from you, Eleanor smiled softly. Frank always said, life's greatest gifts come disguised as disasters. She paused by her door where a new brass nameplate read, Eleanor Thompson, piano instructor. Finding you again, she said gently, was worth a failing heart. Inside, her room reflected the rebirth of her spirit. Family photos, drawings from her students, stacks of sheet music, and on her nightstand, Frank's restored music box. Bill had ordered parts from Switzerland to repair it, returning the song she thought she'd lost forever. Every night she wound it carefully, letting Claire de Lune carry her into sleep. After settling her mother, Rebecca stepped into the hall and nearly bumped into Douglas. Sorry, she said quickly. Mother's resting before lunch. Douglas nodded, his once stern demeanor softened. Actually, I was looking for you. The foundation board approved your scholarship proposal. Rebecca's eyes widened. All of it? Even the instruments? All of it, Douglas confirmed. $10,000 a year for music education, focused on seniors and at-risk youth. The intergenerational model was compelling. The idea was simple yet profound. Bring children into Oak Ridge for lessons, pairing them with residents as mentors. Healing for both ends of life's spectrum. Thank you, Rebecca said sincerely. This means everything to Mother. Douglas nodded again. The board meets in 10 minutes. We're voting on the pediatric wing expansion. As he walked away, Rebecca marveled at the man's transformation. The administrator who once banned a dog from Oak Ridge was now building wings for children and therapy animals. The turning point, she knew, came the day Amanda first met Max. Cameras captured the moment. Amanda kneeling beside him, signing rapidly, while Max responded in his soft, melodic tones. Whatever passed between them released something in Douglas, permission to heal. By lunchtime, the dining room buzzed with laughter. Gone were the sterile trays and fixed schedules. Residents now dined when they wished, with whom they wished. Eleanor joined her usual table, Mrs. Delgado, Mr. Collins, and a few others. Max sat beside her, tail wagging, collecting sneaky treats beneath the table. The TV people called again, Mrs. Delgado said proudly. They want us to recreate the original video. Only if you join us on camera this time, Eleanor teased. Mrs. Delgado chuckled, waving her hand. I just did what anyone would do. Not anyone, Mr. Collins said softly. Not before Max, it was true. Before Max, Oak Ridge had been silent. After him, it sang. Sometimes the loudest voices come from those who cannot speak, and the deepest healing begins when we finally learn to listen. Max rested in his usual spot beside Eleanor's chair, occasionally accepting gentle pats from the children. Grandma, is it true Max can talk? 7-year-old Sophia whispered, her voice full of wonder. Not exactly, Eleanor replied with a warm smile. He communicates, but not with words like we use. He has his own language, like when he makes those funny sounds if someone's about to get sick. Jacob asked, remembering one of Max's medical alerts during a past visit. Exactly, Bill confirmed. He notices things we might miss. That's why he's the best teacher, Eleanor added softly. He listens differently. Rebecca watched her mother interact with her grandchildren, a sight she once feared she'd never see again after Eleanor had withdrawn following Frank's death. There was laughter now, music in their home again. Mom's going to play with the choir at Sunday's concert, Rebecca told her children. And Max will be performing too. He sings. Sophia gasped. In his own way, Eleanor said with a twinkle. You'll have to come see. After dinner, as residents and visitors mingled through the warm, lamplit common area, Douglas approached Eleanor. His posture was still formal, but his voice carried genuine respect. Mrs. Thompson, do you have a moment? Eleanor excused herself from her family and followed him to a quiet corner. Is something wrong? She asked gently. No, quite the opposite, Douglas said, his eyes glinting with restrained excitement. The Department of Veterans Affairs is interested in implementing our therapy program at their facilities. Eleanor nodded knowingly. The effectiveness of animal therapy for PTSD and trauma-related conditions was no secret to her. That's wonderful news, she said. They've requested that Max visit their pilot location next month, with you, of course. If you're willing. The request struck Eleanor deeply. From abandoned puppy to therapeutic pioneer, Max's journey mirrored her own rediscovery of purpose. Of course we'll go, she said softly. Max would be disappointed if we declined an invitation to perform. Douglas almost smiled, a rare thing. The VA director was skeptical at first, until I showed him videos of Max's sessions. Now he wants to expand the program across all 27 regional facilities. All because you had the courage to change your mind. Eleanor smiled knowingly. The data became compelling? She teased. Douglas straightened, uncomfortable with the sentiment. Yes, ma'am. The heart became compelling, Eleanor corrected gently. Sometimes we need reminding that regulations serve people, not the other way around. Before Douglas could reply, a cheerful commotion rippled through the room. Amanda had arrived for her weekly visit, accompanied by her caseworker and therapy dogs. Since beginning her transitional visits to Oak Ridge, she had connected with several residents, especially those who struggled to communicate. Douglas moved immediately to his sister's side. Eleanor watched him with quiet admiration, his protective stance beside Amanda's growing confidence. Though Amanda still didn't speak verbally, her animated signing, interpreted by her caseworker, filled the room with vibrant energy. Max recognized her instantly, approaching with his signature greeting, a melodic, almost musical series of sounds he reserved only for those he considered family. Amanda knelt and signed with a radiant smile. Welcome, friend. Joy. No translation was needed. The next day brought music back to Oak Ridge. The choir, formed after Eleanor's return, gathered in the common room. Some residents had once been professional singers. Others simply loved to hum along. Under Rebecca's gentle guidance, they practiced for Sunday's concert, their confidence growing with each note. Eleanor sat at the piano, her arthritic fingers dancing slowly but surely across the keys. Max, ever her companion, positioned himself beside the bench, occasionally adding his unique vocalizations when the choir hesitated. The residents no longer found it strange. Visitors, however, still stopped and smiled in wonder. A German shepherd singing beside an elderly pianist, both reborn through music. Later, as night deepened, Eleanor prepared for bed. Her nightly ritual had grown familiar. Counting medication, recording vitals, deep breathing, all with Max's watchful eyes beside her. Rebecca helped tuck her in, adjusting pillows with the tenderness of a daughter who had learned to treasure every evening. Jacob wants piano lessons, she said softly. He wants to play with Max like Grandma does, Eleanor smiled. He has a good ear. Did you hear him humming today? Just like Dad, Rebecca said, and for once the memory brought peace, not pain. When Rebecca left, Eleanor wound Frank's old music box. Its delicate tune filled the room as Max curled up on his orthopedic mat beside her bed. A donation from the company that had seen his viral story. Eleanor reached out, whispering, "We've come a long way from that snowstorm. Haven't we?" Max lifted his head beneath her hand, responding with his soft, familiar sound, the one that always seemed like an answer. Outside, spring had painted Oak Ridge in color. Tulips and daffodils bloomed where snow once fell, planted by volunteers inspired by Max's journey. Nearby, construction had begun on the new pediatric wing, and a bench stood proudly in Frank Thompson's honor, donated by the Amanda Parker Foundation. As the year turned toward Christmas, Oak Ridge buzzed with preparation. Decorations filled the common room, handmade ornaments, embroidered stockings, and a special one for Max and the other therapy dogs. Eleanor played Silent Night on the piano as residents gathered, their voices blending in harmony. Max lay beside her, occasionally joining in, his sounds no longer startling but celebrated. The soul of Oak Ridge's unique choir. Rebecca joined for the final song. Auld Lang Syne, their fingers shared the keys. Their hearts the same rhythm. Douglas stood at the back, watching in quiet pride. Beside him, Sarah reviewed data showing reduced falls, improved memory, and fewer antidepressants. The numbers told one story, but the smiles told another. Amanda sat among residents, signing along to the carols. When she signed thank you, the residents responded in kind, their hands forming the gesture they had learned just for her. As snow began to fall outside, the final chord rang out. Applause erupted, warm, genuine, united. Max rose, bowed his head, and everyone swore it looked like a bow. Eleanor stroked his head, tears glistening. She remembered that broken puppy from the storm, how he'd been abandoned, forgotten, yet somehow still willing to love. For next year's concert, she announced, smiling through the emotion, we'll premiere an original song. My daughter and I are writing it together, with Max's help. Of course, laughter rippled through the room, full of life and love. That night, as the others left, Eleanor remained by the fire with Rebecca, Bill, Sarah, and Douglas. The governor's office called again, Sarah said. They want you and Douglas to serve on the new Elder Care Commission. They even mentioned Max by name, Douglas added, amused. First dog to be named honorary commissioner, I think. Eleanor smiled, running her fingers along Frank's repaired music box. He always said the greatest journeys begin with unexpected detours. Bill nodded toward Max. And some detours come with 4 paws and a voice all their own. As if on cue, Max lifted his head and made that familiar sound. Not a bark, not a whine, but something pure and profound. A voice that had bridged loneliness, healed pain, and reminded them all that communication runs deeper than words. Outside, snow blanketed Oak Ridge in soft silence. Inside, warmth pulsed through the air, through laughter, music, and love reborn. Eleanor reached down to stroke Max's head. He responded with that gentle murmur again, his way of saying, I'm here. I understand. You are not alone, and in that moment, surrounded by family as both human and canine, Eleanor, Thompson knew the truth Frank had always believed. Broken things can be mended. Silent hearts can sing again, and love in all its forms remains the most eloquent language of all.